Hi, everyone. Good morning. Happy Saturday. My name's Jen with Slope Garden Center. Welcome to our webinar on becoming an indoor plant parent with Taylor Pochron. So we're talking about indoor gardening for the next couple of webinars, and it feels perfect because we're kind of getting in sweater weather right now. And well, I have a sweater on anyway. And so indoors, bringing green indoors is nice to talk about, and how to be an effective plant parent. So Taylor will go over several different topics. And Taylor he's one of the assistant managers at our Slope Boulevard location in San Francisco, the mothership. And he did provide a supply list for the products that he'll be talking about today. And you should have received a copy of that on the reminder email that you got about an hour ago. If for some reason you don't have that, feel free to let me know, and I'm happy to send you the link. And then this is being recorded, and the recording will be available on Tuesday. Yeah, today's Saturday. So the recording will be available on Tuesday, and his supply list will be underneath the recording on our website. You can also view the recording on our YouTube channel. If you subscribe to our YouTube, then you'll get a notification when that's up. So that's kind of fun. And then if you have any questions, feel free to feed them into the Q&A portion. Taylor, he likes to have some interaction. If you have a question while he's talking, feel free. I can sort of, relay that to him and have a little bit more of a conversation during his presentation. That would be great. And then our next class will be on Wednesday, and it's also indoors, and it's indoor plant design with Alyssa Benzel, who is also from the Slope Boulevard location. So they've got, a good team of indoor plant experts there. Anyway, I'm going to turn it over to Taylor, and I'm looking forward to your presentation. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. And thanks a lot, Taylor.
Yeah, am I on it? Yay! Hello. Thank you, Jen. I know it's always the beginning of our webinars is exciting, and we're getting everything together, but I hope everyone is. It sounds like if you're watching this, you're probably somewhat familiar with our webinars, and join us for some more of them and look at all the other recordings, because it's fun to make them, and the more people we get involved, the better we can make them and the more we can make. So I don't know, I'm excited. But I have a bunch of stuff to talk about today, and we have about an hour or so until my voice goes out, or an hour. So we'll see what comes first. And I just kind of want to go through it, because being a plant parent is a lot to talk about. It's like being any kind of, there's a lot to do. So in general, I wanted to first kind of come out and say, like, if we have the topic today is becoming a plant parent. And honestly, it's really easy to become a plant parent, because you have to own a plant. And so most of you, I'm sure almost all of you, actually have a plant. So congratulations, you are a plant. We are all in this together. So it is something that is easy to become, of course, but it is something that takes a lot of care and effort, time, and everyone approaches it really differently. So I wanted to come in today and just give you really more of a snapshot of where I'm at in my plant parenting, or where I'm at, taking care of houseplants and taking care of plants in general, because it's an evolving kind of steps through my life. I'm going to definitely be changing as I go and learn more things. All going to be learning more things. So it is not something that is stagnant. It's not something that is a defined kind of timeline, or something that you can be, can't be. It's something that kind of evolves. And I'm really excited to show you, where I'm at right now. I have a bunch of plants all around me. I know it's kind of a little bit overwhelming sometimes, but I have assortment I brought over to this desk right here to talk about, because I thought today would be really nice to kind of show you some of the projects and the things that you have to do when you have a lot of plants, or when you have just any amount of plants, because it's not just owning it and putting it in the corner and maybe watering it every once in a while, like that is something that you can do, but you tend to not get the full effect out of it. You need to kind of approach it with any like how you approach anything that takes a lot of effort and time. So let's get into a few of the different kinds of projects. Actually, well, first, let me tell you a little bit about myself so you have a little bit of a starting point to know why I'm talking right now. I, like Jen said, work at the Garden Center. I've been there for around 5 years or so. So I've been taking care of plants and house plants for around that time. I thought I got my first like actual house plant when I first started working there. It's kind of what you do. You get your plants and you're like, oh, I'm excited. I'm going to learn. And I still have it. It's crawling all over my walls. It's a big Pothos. And then I have just accumulated more and more over the past couple of years. I have a lot of outdoor plants too, but indoor is so much fun. I love having plants around me. I love having greenery. As you can see, my room is kind of covered. I like kind of covering every surface with this. I have many a desk in here, and they all have plants across the board. I don't really have a lot of workspace. I have plant space, and that's just kind of the approach I took to it. And it's not everyone does that, but it is what I like to do. Something I'm really interested in is variety. I love to have different kinds of plants. I love having of course, like the newer or the more trendy kinds of plants are always really exciting, new ones that come in, but it's really just having a assortment of really interesting things that are growing, and they all have different growing styles and different leaf patterns and different root structures. And that's what really excites me. I studied plants before I worked at Float for about 4 years at UC Santa Cruz. I got a botany degree. So yay. I approached that really in the scientific way. So I really love learning about the actual intricacies and like the small parts of the plants, all like the microbiology, all the processes and all that kinds of stuff. And that's what really excites me about them. And then I went from there and just kind of fell in love with just growing them and having them, taking care of them. And so I'm now someone who really adores plants and will have them for the rest of my life. And I know that many of you are probably in a similar boat. So let's talk about it. I love when people come into our store. I'm on the floor all the time talking with guests and different people that come in. And it is one of the best parts about working at a nursery or working at the garden center is I have so many interesting conversations with probably all of you where you bring in an idea or a plant or you picture of something and you want to know like what's going on or why it's doing a certain thing. And having that conversation really builds up my knowledge. It kind of solidifies some kind of facts that I've been thinking about or I've maybe learned about. And then I'm able to now share it on these kinds of platforms through webinar to lots of people, or also when it comes to the store, my knowledge is just slowly building over time, and everyone that works at our store is doing the same thing. So that's kind of just where I'm at right now. Welcome to this little window into my plant parenthood. So I have a few things I want to talk about today, like I said, and I'm going to go through a couple of them, and I'm going to just see how it goes. And if you have questions as we're going, please throw them into the chat or throw them into the Q&A. Jen will keep looking at them. If it's about like a certain specific plant, I can kind of let you know a little bit what I know. If it's about a process that's happening or if it's about a bug issue or anything like that, might as well throw it in there. We'll see what we can talk about because I have a random amount of knowledge that I'm willing to share around. Okay, so let's get going. I have here a plant that I really love. It's something that is so cool, and I've had it for maybe like 2 years now. And it's huge. I got this as a 4-inch plant. So, a lot of us start small because it's cheaper, a little bit easier, more manageable than getting a huge plant, which is always beautiful. You got a giant plant to take care of it. But starting out small is a totally valid way to get going. A little 4-inch plant in a little pot can grow up to something that is beautiful and big and very productive within about 2 years, about 3 years or so. So be ready for that. I wanted to give everyone a heads up that, as you accumulate plants, they grow. And of course, as the plants grow, but a lot of times I have people that I talk to that maybe don't really realize the extent of growth, or, plants can't just be stopped from growing. You can't just like put it into a very tiny pot and just completely like space it or anything like that. It's a plant that's going to be evolving and changing over time. And every once in a while, it'll look beautiful and lush and perfect. And then it'll kind of go through some periods of maybe a dampening amount. So maybe you got some bugs or maybe you got some sort of dry period or something like that. So they can go through stages and then you can work with them and produce really amazing plants. This is a Nematanthis, which is the goldfish plant. One of my favorite plants. It has these cool flowers. They look like this. little goldfish flowers. Not really focusing, but this is a plant that will produce flowers year round. I have a couple of them on it. It looks like little goldfish swimming through some coral, and is one of my favorite plants because it's so easy to take care of. It grows so well, and it also has the capability of propagating so easily. And that's what I want to really talk about today for this plant, because I was about to cut it a couple days ago. I came in and saw it's a little bit wild and crazy and has all these leaves going everywhere. And I was like, why not give it a trim so I can actually propagate it more? Because that's what I love doing with this plant. I just saw someone ask, it is a Nematanthis or goldfish plant. So if you're looking for a cool plant in the store, look for the goldfish plant because it's probably one of my favorites. I have little babies of them. This is all from this mother plant. I've taken cuttings and grown them in little pots. So if you want a plant that you can propagate and really have a cute little army of plants you can give away or just have a bunch of them, it's a great one. And I want to show this. I have a mug, pretty cute mug too, but it is something that I've consistently grown a bunch of cuttings in and just let them root. I kind of forget about them for a little while. This has probably been here for a couple of months without me realizing it, but you can see that's a huge root ball from all these cuttings that I just took off of this plant not that long ago. So the Nematanthis is one of these plants that just will root from its stems quite easily in water. I'm sure you can do it in soil too, but I tend to do it in water because I like throwing a mug on my desk, plant inside of it. And I kind of wanted to show you today
Taylor,
how easy it is.
can you hold the plant still, because it's like
Waving.
it's waving. So
Sorry,
yeah, that's better. Thank you.
There's a lot to it. It's a very glossy plant. It
Yeah.
has a shiny dark leaf. It has orange flowers, sometimes red flowers. They are a little bit vine-like growing, but they do have a structured kind of stem and stalk to them. So they're an upright plant. I have a few stakes in here that keeps it nice and upright, so it doesn't just like go crazy everywhere. And I wanted to kind of show you just how easy it is to trim and propagate them. What I usually look at is the stems or the branches that are kind of coming out in all directions. I want this plant to be a little bit more within its pot's distance. I have a lot of plants, and so if they are really growing out wide, then they start to kind of touch each other, and that can cause some problems with bugs and diseases and other things. So you kind of keep them a little bit more contained. They are a little bit better long term. So I have a little glass here, fill it up with some water. For a staging area. And now I just come in and you trim off one of the stalks. There's a lot of them. So you can see there's a bunch of leaves on this one. I have a growth point at the end. You can absolutely do shorter sections, but I'm going to be throwing it into a glass of water. So I kind of like it a little bit longer so it peeks out the top. And then you can see that there's leaves going all the way down to the bottom. If I just put this right into the water, it would probably be okay, but these would be completely submerged, and having a completely submerged leaf is not the best thing for that leaf, and it probably won't do so well. It might kind of rot away. What I usually do with these ones, they're pretty easy to pick off. I just strip off the bottom leaves, and that allows these root nodes, or these nodes where the leaves are growing out of, to become root nodes and actually grow the roots out. So just drop them in, submerge it, nice and easy. I'm going to do a couple of them just to get this new batch going, because like I said, like this plant a lot and would love to have more of them. I give them as gifts pretty often. So I just have a couple rolling in my water. They will be ready in the future. It takes a couple of weeks to actually fully root. Some plants are faster, some plants are slower. It's actually just it's something that you have to try and test over time. So if you have a plant that you feel like is rooting really quickly, then maybe start propagating a little bit more, see what you can do with that. If it's a plant that's rooting a little bit slower, then keep an eye on it. Make sure it doesn't dry out, make sure it has enough sun. A lot of factors that actually go into propagating them. The last thing is I'll probably be adding a little bit of a rooting hormone. I use taproots a lot. I really like this stuff. It has a willow bark extract in it. I talked to a lot of guests about it because it's a very soft fertilizer, but it has a root stimulant with that willow bark. So putting a little bit of this into your water that you have your cuttings into, like a little dash, will actually stimulate those roots to start growing again, and you'll have a better and faster propagation period.
Do you have to change the water? Do you change the water, or do you, if it takes a couple weeks to root, are you just sort of adding to that solution, or do you dump the whole thing out and do a fresh one?
It's a great question, and it's one that really, it can vary, but what I usually say is if you can change your water about once a week, you're in the clear. You're doing really well. About once every 2 weeks is usually fine. If you don't change it every couple of months or so, you can run into problems with the roots getting a little bit soggy or like a little bit kind of jello-y or a little bit kind of slimy. That usually means that there's a buildup of bacteria or a buildup of compounds that are just kind of bogging up the water and actually stops the roots from producing nice and healthily. So switching out your water pretty often actually causes a better and more full-grown kind of propagation period. So like I said, about once a week if you can. Once every 2 weeks is great. You don't have to do it every day. That's a little bit crazy, but if you want to, you can. I use the water that I use from my propagations to water all my other plants. They have some great nutrients in there, and they have the willow bark from the taproot. So I just kind of share it around and then put some more inside. So that's kind of how I approach propagating with these ones. I'm going to do a quick few more cuttings. And is there any more kind of questions about this propagation stuff, or things I should kind of talk about while we're talking about this awesome goldfish plant?
Well, just one person commented that when they try to plant cuttings they've rooted in water, they subsequently die. And so would you say that a lot depends on the plant that you're, are some plants easier to propagate? Maybe when it's transitioning, is there a trick that would help it so it doesn't die once it gets into the soil?
There is. It's hard to say there's a trick, but it is actually it's very true that when you go and you plant things or you root things in water, you actually get the roots growing into the water, that they will have a little bit harder time transitioning to soil or transitioning to another medium. When you grow roots in water, they actually have a little bit of a sheath over their root system that is a coating, and that coating will protect it from too much water going in all at once, because like through osmosis, the water wants to go in and expand that root system. So they have to actually protect their roots with this coating when they're being propagated in water. When you transition it to soil, it doesn't need it as much. And so it can cause a little bit of a transitional shock when you go from water to soil. And it's something you kind of have to deal with. I've had success with certain plants compared to other plants. So the Nepenthes or Nematanthis I've not really had any problem with just transitioning straight to soil. I definitely had a few other vining plants or a few more tender plants that had a really hard struggle going from water to soil. So definitely something to pay attention to. You want to baby it, keep them a little bit more moist. You don't really want to bog it down with too much water, because that can also cause root rot in its own way. So you have to just kind of baby it a little bit more, make sure it's a little bit more hydrated at the beginning while it's transitioning, and it should be okay.
Are you looking for, do you want, when you propagate it, do you want the root to be like an inch long before you transition it to soil? Or, is there maybe can it be too long in the water and that would not do? Yeah. Okay. So
this one is really far gone. It's much farther than I usually ever have to worry about. And it's really ready to go the soil and probably just take it off. About an inch or so is a great starting point. You can start at little nubbins of roots, just just propagate those roots. You got them started and you can go into soil and get them going. But some plants that you feel like you're a little bit worried that maybe you struggled with putting it into soil before. If you feel like it needs a little bit more root on it, give it a little bit more time, give it a couple more weeks to grow out. I think around 1 to 2 inches is a great starting point. Once it gets to this kind of big mess, then you're good to go. No problems there.
Okay. And do you recommend a transplant food? Sorry, last question.
Yeah, that's good. Good question. Totally. I usually always, and I'll talk about this a little bit more when I'm transplanting stuff, I always throw in some Sure Starts or the Down to Earth BioLive. There's a few transplant foods that we sell at our store. Transplant foods really just means it has a little bit more of the potassium, which I know usually means like flowering kind of components, but the potassium, or the, sorry, phosphorus, the phosphorus, which is the second number, is usually my headphones are dying away. So if it cuts out, let me know. The phosphorus are what's usually for roots, or it's for flowers, but it's also for roots. So having a little bit higher number there, and also having the mycorrhizae, or like the microorganisms, is a great transplant fertilizer. I usually put it in all the stuff I transplant. So I would say yes to that question, but it's not always necessary. It depends on your soil mix. If your soil has a lot of nutrients in it, then it's really good.
Great.
Alrighty. So I'm going to kind of put this back for right now, just so we can move along onto our next kind of talk. But if you want me to talk a little bit more about any of these kinds of plants, let me know. We can always do some more questions at the end.
Are you going to go over light requirements and whatnot?
Yeah,
Okay.
I definitely can, because we'll do a little transition here, and I will talk about light before I go to the next one, because lighting is like water, is a really, really important part of growing plants, right? It's something that you really, of course, need, and all the plants have different requirements for water and for light. I have different spots in my room that get a lot more sun, some parts that get a little less sun. So this is the wall that gets a little bit less farther away from the window, where the wall that direction is actually my window spot. And so that will get a lot of bright light. I put a lot more of my like cactuses and succulents, a lot more of my maybe hardier plants that have a little bit more light and stuff like that over in that direction. Where on this side, I usually put a little bit more of my pothos or my ivy or anything that takes a little bit less light. So then the goldfish plant itself, if you're looking more for that one, takes a little bit brighter light. I love putting it in east-facing windows, so some morning sun is really great for that. But
Taylor, I think your headphones are fading out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, maybe because now, okay, the sound. Yeah, that's better.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Oh, good. Okay. Perfect.
I'll have to be careful with my sound there. Sorry, all.
There you are. Okay.
Okay.
So the pothos, you were saying you put that away from the light a little bit.
A little bit of a area that takes a little bit less sunlight. So I have some pothos in the corners of my rooms. I have some ferns around, kind of tucked away in corners. So definitely, like, working with your room, working with your space to create a nice lighting area is pretty important. And so, like I said, this one that I was just talking about takes a pretty average amount of sunlight. That's why I think it's a really easy and nice growing plant. But a little bit more of a morning sun is always really good for some good house plants. So that's why I usually recommend for that one.
Yeah, I mean, you have to, like, just in general, just for people to understand the light, like a lot of indoor plants, we say like bright indirect light, because you imagine that the light coming through the window it's like a magnifying glass. So it can be a lot more intense. So if you have it really close to a window, it can, with direct light coming through the window, not many indoor plants can take that, right?
No, it can be pretty harsh.
Yeah.
And you'll notice it on the leaves. They'll start growing a little bit more on the pale side or silvery side if they're getting like a sun bleach, or sometimes they'll even go towards like a yellowing color, or like a really bright kind of
right.
Loss of chlorophyll is usually meaning it's like getting a little bit too much sun. It can also mean you're getting a little bit too much water. So you kind of have to test the waters and see what's maybe happening with your plant. And it's always great to come in and talk to us, because we kind of give you some heads up on why that, if your plant's in this corner, maybe it's getting too much light, getting too little light. We'll be able to talk to you about that. And it's always good to think about what's happening and test it out. It's awesome to ask that if we have the goldfish plants that floats, and we totally
everybody wants it. Everybody wants the plant now.
Sorry, yeah. I mean, I'll highlight a plant every once in a while.
Yeah,
it's a good one, and we do usually carry it. It's a pretty fun one for us. So yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
and like Taylor said too, I mean, you can bring in a leaf sample into the stores, and the staff is really good at identifying, like you said, if it's a watering issue or a light issue, bring in the sample in a plastic bag. That's the one thing that we ask.
Because honestly, and the plastic bag is pretty important just because every once in a while you'll bring in a plant and you're thinking, oh, it's just getting too much light, or maybe it's getting too much water. We look at it and we're like, well, it's actually covered in bugs and it's actually covered in this kind of problem. Or it's a
and it's
disease
going to
that we have to
infest
worry about.
everything. Right.
Yeah. So you want to make sure that you're not spreading that, of course, but also you want to make sure you're getting the right care. And so sometimes just talking about the plants can really give you a lot of insight, but not without seeing it, you won't really know what's going on. Okay. I have another plant here that I want to talk about because it's a plant that I've never really considered like my favorite plant or something that I really like too much, but I have these two Chaffleras here. So a Chafflera is the umbrella plant or the umbrella tree, and they are a really good house plant that takes average sunlight, average watering. They don't really have anything super special in those kinds of directions, but they do well in most houses. They do well in all like the climates of all the like temperatures that we usually like to sit in. So if you're in a comfortable temperature, they're in a comfortable temperature. And so these ones are Chaffleras that are actually pretty small. They grow nice and big. Like they're actually a large plant that you get a large specimen of when you go to our stores. But like I said, it wasn't my favorite plant to start out with. And so I wanted to start really small. I wanted to get a little one. I got a little one that actually was in a 4-inch container, like a little pot, and it had 2 stems inside of it. And so I had this 2-stem little Chafflera, and I was like, okay, cool. I'll plant into a pot. And when I started planting it, I was actually like moving the soil a little bit, getting it ready for its new pot, and they actually separated really easily. And so because they separated really easily, I thought maybe I'll put in 2 different pots and test something out because I am very into bonsais. And one of the specimens, there's not very many specimens that you can do an indoor bonsai or thought of an indoor bonsai, but Chaffleras are one of those. And I thought I'm going to try one where I actually trim it and see if I can make it into a little bit more of a statuous small tree. I'm going to let one just grow. And so you can see these are the same from the same pot and the same 2 stems. They looked really similar when I first got them. But this one I have trimmed a few times. Sorry, I'll stand still. Right here, you can see that there is the base trunk. This is probably your main leader going all the way up. But right here, there is a cut point where I actually did my first cut, and that caused a growth coming out here and this growth coming out here. And so those ones were really early on in its development, and they've developed into like a nice thick trunk already. I've actually did another cut all the way up here, but actually I think it's right there. But that one continued as a single stem. It didn't actually split. And this is a plant that I have been thinking about trimming back a couple of times now, and I haven't done it yet because it's kind of hard because it looks really good. I really like how it looks right now, but I think if I was to continue it, and I'm going to continue it, of course, coming in and actually trimming it again, you can propagate the top stem. If you can, sometimes, you know, it's not always a surefire, but you can probably get some roots on these guys. But you can propagate the top stem. If I cut it here, I can actually get some more growth points down at the bottom and have a little bit more of a very bonsai looked Chafflera. And I think it's a really cool one. So I've been really excited about this one. And then this guy, I haven't transplanted in a long time. As you can tell, is in a very tiny pot. And I've talked to many people who show me their plants and they're in very, very tiny pots. And then the first recommendation is you should probably upgrade to the next size. You need to give it root space to grow. And I totally agree. And I think that's also why I have a lot less of my leaves going all the way up the trunk. The more or the less space you have in your container, the less root space you have, the less that the plant can actually contain, or less the plant can actually have leaves growing. It can't really sustain that much foliage. So it will tend to slowly cause the foliage to die back a little bit. This is the lowest leaf. You can see it's starting to yellow right there. It'll probably give me a couple more weeks or so and die away. And that's totally fine. It's kind of what I expected as it was growing. I have this little kind of stalk, but I thought today, I was going to do it the other day, but I thought, why not bring it to the webinar? I'm going to do a little repot. So we're going to pull it out of the pot to see what it looks like. It's been in there for a couple of years. So I'm going to check out what's going on in the root system. And you're going to see it too. So let's see. All right. And I have, you can use a lot of different tools. One of my favorite tools, and I didn't put it on the supply list because not everyone has it, but these little bonsai rakes and stuff are perfect for these little plants to try and get the roots out from the side. without my headphones, I'm sorry if the sound's a little bit off. It was working for a while, but I ran out of battery.
No, it's fine. It's working fine.
Yeah.
Do you, in terms of pot size, do you, like when you were saying the amount of root space, there's a direct correlation between root space and the amount of green stuff that you have coming out the top. So for example, if you buy a 4-inch plant,
Yeah.
is there a general, would you say, do you want to, you know, go up an inch or go up a couple inches when you repot, or, you know, what would you suggest?
Yeah, totally great question. There are a lot of different kind of methods to it, and it really depends on the plant, which makes it a little bit more difficult, but also makes you have that interaction with talking about the plant. Some of them that grow really large, so a plant that likes to get really big will want a little bit more space, of course, and some plants that actually stay pretty small can only be upgraded a little bit of space. I have this larger, I think it's a 6-inch pot. It's a Cindy pot. We got them in recently. They're pretty nice and shiny. I think they're pretty cool. They have a attached saucer to the bottom. Many of our indoor plant pots have saucers on the bottom. It works out really well because the water can still drain out and you can kind of tip away the excess water without worry about finding a matching saucer. But I have this one here. It is a fair bit bigger, but like I said, this plant's been in here for a little while and it could probably use a lot larger home. So I'm going a little bit on the larger side. But I think going from a 4-inch to a 6-inch is totally fine. It's a great kind of jumping point. Some plants you can go from a little 4-inch nursery cup to somewhat of a 4 to 5-inch little terracotta or whatever kind of glazed pot it is, and just go a small upgrade and let it grow into that for a little while. Sometimes the roots are pretty small in those little plants, so you don't want to just overwhelm it with a really big pot. The main thing that we always talk about is if you have a very small root system and a really small plant into a larger pot with a lot of soil, it's really easy to overwhelm it. It's really easy to give it too much water. Have all that extra soil contains so much water retentive material that those little roots get kind of surrounded and they get a little bit soaked for too long. And it's really easy to get that root rot kind of action, which I'm sure a lot of us are worried about or know about. So be careful of root rot in that sense. I think it's totally fine to upgrade this one to this size, and I'm going to make sure that there's some good drainage in here too.
Yeah, and you can, I mean, just while he's talking, because I do container design, so I feel like I can say a little bit about this too.
Yeah, go for it.
Is that what I always say with containers is that everything needs to be assessed every 4 to 6 months, because the plant is still growing and it's a fixed space. So indoors, you don't always have the luxury of, you know, having the space to keep adding a bigger pot. And so every 4 to 6 months, it might be that you take the plant out and you cut the root and then you put it back if you can only, you know, if you only have like a small space, basically, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
It's always good to check that. And so Jenna has a lot of knowledge with planting up larger containers, and especially like those really intricate, like multiple steps or multiple plant containers and stuff. And so it really does change it a little bit more. It makes it a little ecosystem almost. So it's good to check on them every once in a while. Things grow out. Plants grow big, guys.
Yeah.
Plants get big, and so you need to make sure that you are helping them out. I have my gloves. It's always good to use gloves when you're working with soils. A lot of stuff can get into your fingernails. You can get like splinters, all that kinds of stuff. It's just a good habit, and we always recommend glove safety at our work. I have a little pot here with some slope potting soil. It's a really good kind of nice dark mix of slope potting soil. I have some perlite. So the perlite is the really white stuff. And then I have some pumice, which is the volcanic pumice. You can absolutely just plant straight into the slope organic or slope regular potting soil or any of the potting soils that we sell. They're definitely a good mixture. Like I said, I kind of wanted a little bit more drainage into my container. So I kind of like adding the amendments that we also sell. The volcanic pumice or the perlite are great amendments for that kind of aeration and kind of breaks up the very sticky material that sometimes soil can become. All right, mix it up so it just kind of looks like an Oreo kind of color, the dark color with a little bit of white flecks around. And then into my container, I dropped a drainage net. We sell different kinds of drainage netting. This is the one I sell for my bonsais, but we also have the keeper stoppers at our store, which are little drainage nets that you put over the hole. It's pretty important, especially for these kinds of pots, because you don't want the extra soil to go into your hole and clog up your little drainage system. Also, especially in outdoor environments, it stops the bugs from coming in from the bottom. All the earwigs and all the snails and slugs and all that kinds of stuff, they like to go into the bottom hole. So plugging up your hole with a drainage net allows the water to get through, but the soil and the bugs not go through.
Taylor, can you go over what was in that mixture one more time? Okay.
So I don't want to make too much noise with bags, so sorry if it's a little bit loud, but I use perlite as one of the amendments. This is a rock, is a heat-treated rock is actually how it's always been described to me. It's something that actually kind of puffs up and it has this good water-retentive kind of material, but it's also a substance that is still a rock, so it doesn't have a lot of like nutrients, or it doesn't like get bogged up by all those kinds of microorganisms and stuff. So it's a good breaking up material for your soil. I also added in some pumice. This is the volcanic pumice that we sell. I like this stuff a lot. I use it in a lot of my outdoor gardening. I use it in a lot of my succulents. I use it in a lot of my bonsais. And I've been using it more in my indoor plants recently too. And then the actual soil. The slow organic potting soil is my main go-to. It's a really easy one to get. We sell it in small bags and big bags. The organic potting soil has a little bit extra nutrients in it. So it has some chicken manure, or it has some back guano and kelp meal and featherbone meal and all those kinds of little nutrient charges. So it's a great mix if you want to just have something easy to use with a little bit of nutrients inside of it. I also definitely use the regular potting soil or our indoor potting soil from Sloat. So they're all a little bit different, and you can definitely talk to our staff about like why you use one over another for your plant. But in general, organic potting soil has more water retention. The indoor potting soil has a lot more drainage, and the regular potting soil, just slope potting soil, is kind of right in the middle. All right. So it's a pretty simple kind of process, but a lot of people always ask about this. How do you just pot the plants? Like, what do you actually do? Like I said, you drop a drainage net in the bottom over the hole. You fill up the pot to a good amount of the soil, just so you have the soil underneath the new root ball, but you make a little bit of a hole in the space for your new plant with depending on the size of the container. And then, the last thing is the Sure Start, like I was talking about earlier. It's a great starter fertilizer. I always sprinkle a little bit over the hole I kind of made where I put the new plant in. It's good to have the fertilizer actually touch the new root system, because it starts creating this network of the mycorrhizae, which are your little microorganisms that really helps the roots uptake nutrients and water. And so sprinkling a little bit of that in will really help the plant kind of get going. Jen, when I first started working with Sloat, always described it as dusting a donut. I think I said that so many times in my life now.
I know, I say it all the time.
Dust a donut. All right. So now it's time to actually see what's going on. I have a little bit of a rock kind of top dressing on this one, so I'm going to try and pour that out without making too much noise. And then I'll pop it out. There you go. So this is one of my favorite parts. I love talking about roots. Roots are so cool and a really fascinating part about planting. A lot of times people kind of don't really think about the roots or forget about them, but they are the lifeblood of your plant. They are really what's actually keeping it alive. And if you have a healthy root system, and if you have no plant, like if you cut this right here and you have a healthy root system, the plant can regenerate. And so it actually has the ability to kind of keep on taking up nutrients and push out growth. So always making sure that your roots are healthy and strong is the best thing for your plant. So it's always something that I kind of recommend to talk to people about. You know, they might not know what's really going on inside their pot. And so it's good to kind of open it up and check it out. I can give you a little heads up for this one. It's very compacted. I've had it in this pot for a long time. You see circling roots on the very top. Whenever you start seeing circling roots, that really does mean you are pot bound. It is a root bound planter. So it is trying to find new space to grow, and it just keeps on circling around. So at that point, the plant really does need a new home. I'm gonna break it up a little bit, kind of rough up the root ball just so that it can find its way into the pot a little bit easier. You don't want to have, there's different ways of going about it. You can keep it pretty tight if you want the plant to slowly find its way into the new pot. But if you really want to kind of expedite the growth into the pot, I like kind of tickling and breaking up a little bit. If you go too hard and really break up the root system, you can definitely shock your plant. So you kind of have to find the balance, have a gentle touch, but also don't be worried about kind of opening it up a little bit. I like to open up the bottom. You can see I'm kind of coming at the bottom, and that will allow the new roots to really grow down into my pot. And that's what I want.
Taylor, just really quick, back on the soil, how much, what was the ratio of what, the pumice and the perlite? Yeah.
Totally. I'm a little bit haphazard with it. I kind of just guesstimate at this point in my planting career, but I would say if you have about 75% soil with somewhere in between of 25% of your like new rock kind of additions, that's really good for most houseplants. Like you can do 25% perlite, you can do a mixture of perlite and pumice, you can add in some charcoal, you can add a few different things. There's not really one way to do anything. There's never really one way to do anything. So you can play with it, but I usually do about 75% to 25%. If I'm doing bonsais or succulents, I'll maybe increase that a little bit more, where I have a little bit less brown water retentive material, a little bit more of those rocky kind of substances, but that's kind of how I approach it. And then a few spoonfuls of some sort of the starter fertilizer, like a little dusting of the fertilizer or something like that is kind of my mix.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
Thank you. Yeah.
All right. And so this is a nice, simple repot. I hope everyone is not too nervous about repotting their plants, because it's, like I said, a really important part of the process. I put the plant into the center of the pot, right on top of the soil where I put my little fertilizer. And now I'm just kind of tucking the new soil in around the edges. You want to make sure that you fill up all the gaps of air. You don't want like little pockets of air inside your plants, because when you water, it is going to fill up that area and everything's going to get watered. But if there's a pocket of air, that's going to dry out a lot faster. And if any roots that are surrounding that little pocket that gets dried out, they will kind of harden off, and they won't have a lot of little root hairs, or like the kind of like the capillary parts of the roots to actually go out and pull in all the water. They really need that kind of structure to be a little more homogeneous. So I like to make sure that I spread it out, tuck it in, use your fingers, use any tools that you have, whatever you want, just to kind of make sure that there is no big holes, but you also don't want to just smash it in there. You don't really want to completely compact your plant. You want to have good aeration. You want to make sure that there is a space for the water to penetrate and the air to kind of get into the soil, because plants need air and water just like we do. So make sure that it's easy for them to get it.
So the roots that were kind of wrapping around the top of them, did you just kind of like stuff them down into the pot, or? I
opened them up and I put them down. You can, you can approach it a little bit differently. You can snip them off sometimes, but I didn't really want to for this one. You can kind of tuck them in and tuck them around. But I think that they're going to be a good system that's going to grow out the new roots in the actual outer section of the soil that I just added in. So I think that's going to be a nice like new root growth point. But I just kind of tucked it down.
And also the plant, do you typically want to have the plants watered before you repot, or because that one looked kind of dry.
And you are right.
Yeah.
And sometimes I don't do exactly what I should do, but
yeah,
it is really good to actually give it a little bit of water. What happens is when your plant is very, very dry and the root ball is really dry and you put it into a new pot, first off, the roots are more brittle when they are dry, so they can snap and break, and that can cause some damage or a problem for your plants in the future. So if it is really dry and you're kind of really tampering with it, you can snap a lot of your roots. But when they're hydrated, they kind of can easily move around a little bit more. Also, when it's a very dry center and you have a very wet soil on the outside, it's really easy to think that your plant is nice and watered because there's a lot of water inside that pot. But that very center part of that root ball is still dry, and the water can't really get all the way in there because it's very compacted. So when I water this, I'm actually going to be very careful because, like you're right, it was a little bit on the drier side. I'm going to water into the center of the plant really slowly. Make sure that the water kind of goes in and dissipates out. Really nice and slow. Make sure I really hydrate that center area so that the plant is completely watered, and then hopefully the new roots will find its new way into the soil. Does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, great.
Okay, what do you think?
Nice.
New little home. It's going to grow nice and big. I'm planning
It already looks happier. I like it. It looks like really happy with the new home.
So I just planted this one not that long ago into this new pot, and I plan on trying to keep it on a little bit on the smaller side. You know, it's not something you can always do with plants. I'm trying to keep it a little bit smaller, but I've had a little more practice with bonsais, and that's something I'm very interested in. So I like to test the boundaries a little bit in that sense. So I'm going to try and keep that one a little bit on the smaller side and see if this one grows. And then eventually, a couple years down the line, I'll do another webinar or something like that, and I'll have a really big Chafflera, a small Chafflera, and be like, they came from the same plant, you guys. That'll be really cool. All right. We are moving right along. I think we're pretty good on time, right?
Yeah, we're hoping that you talk a little bit about fertilizing.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Let's do a little talk about fertilizing, because the next plant I want to get into is actually the opposite. It doesn't want fertilizing, because I'm going to talk a little bit about a pitcher plant or a carnivorous plant. But in general, most plants need a good amount of fertilizer in their pots. When you have a container and you're growing something inside a container, you are the environment for your plant. You are putting it in you're finding its place, you're giving it its sunlight, you're giving it its water, you're also giving it its food. So if you just put a plant and leave it and don't ever feed it, it's going to slowly work through all that soil, all those kinds of nutrients inside that mix. If you use a more organically rich soil, then it might last for longer. But in general, they will eventually fill up that space with all the roots and then really use up all those nutrients. All the nitrogen and the phosphorus and the potassium and all the micronutrients will go away. At that point, your plant will probably start to suffer a little bit. You'll get some more yellowing leaves. You'll get a little more leaf drop. You might not get a very fast growth. It'll be a little bit slower. So not fertilizing is a way that your plant can actually struggle in that sense. And I have a few fertilizers here. Let me talk about some. Where did they go? I don't know where my maxi went. Okay. Sorry about that. I don't know where my maxi went, but I can talk about it because I talk about maxi every day. We have a bunch of different fertilizers at our store. We have liquid fertilizers and granular fertilizers. Granular fertilizers are like that Sure Start that I have. They come in a bag that's kind of dusty. You can sprinkle it into your soil every once in a while, maybe every 3 months, every 4 months, depending on the type of plant you have, and you sprinkle in that soil. You want some sort of all-purpose fertilizer for most plants. And if you have a very specific plant that likes a very acidic soil or a very acidic fertilizer, then you can get something that's a little bit more specialized to that, and you can talk to our staff about those kinds of products. But in general, an all-purpose fertilizer is mostly what you need. And so there's the granular ones, and then there's the water-based ones, which is like your Maxis. It is a bottle that has a little bit of a granular inside, but you actually mix that with water. M-A-X-S-E-A, Maxi, is the one I tend to use. I really like that stuff. But we also have stuff from Espoma, we have stuff from Tappen Roots, we have stuff from Fox Farm. And now I'm just saying brands at you, but in general, we have a lot of different kinds of liquid fertilizers that you can add to your soil. For the most part, you actually mix it into your watering can. So this is like I think it's like a half-gallon watering can, mixing a spoonful or a tablespoon or whatever the packaging says. You can definitely follow the directions on the back of your fertilizer into your watering can, give a little swirl around, and then go into your plants and water them every once in a while is a great idea. I tend to say that if you can water some fertilizer into your plants about every 2 months, you're on the right track. You're actually trying, you're really giving it some fertilizer. Some plants like it a little bit more, so maybe every once a month can really help out some plants. Some plants really don't like a lot of fertilizer. There's some succulents and some cactuses that just don't want too much of it. So you water it maybe once a year with some fertilizer or something like that. And then some of the fertilizers, if they are a really high number, you can water it a little bit less often with that. If it's a really low number, like a 2-2-2, or the ratio is a little bit smaller, you can do that a little bit more often to kind of give your plants like a consistent boost to kind of really keep on going and pushing out some growth. So the numbers on the fertilizers really, they pertain to the ratio versus the quantity. It's a little bit of a complicated math kind of problem. I don't really want to get into it too much there, but you can definitely talk to our staff about like how much you should use and when you should use it, depending on the plant that you're buying that day. I wish I had
and it's
to show you, but yeah.
I might have one I can go try to find. But and then always best to water first, right? Before you apply the fertilizer solution. Yeah.
Jen's totally right. A dry soil where you add fertilizer to it can really cause a little bit of damage on your plants. So you don't want your nice roots to be there and a little bit dry, maybe not really ready to take in a lot of nutrients, and you hit it with a lot of nutrients, and that can be a little bit of a damaging problem. So make sure your soil is nice and hydrated, and then give it a good fertilizing. That's a good idea.
Great.
It's something you kind of have to like try over time. You have to test out what they like. And like I said, some plants like a lot more, some plants like a lot less. If you feel like a plant is slowing down and it should be maybe growing a little bit more, it's most likely not enough nutrients to really keep on pushing it out, or it's not enough sun, something like that. And they can all kind of coincide together.
I definitely like the liquid fertilizer better for containers and indoors than the granular, personally.
That's what I was talking about Maxi first. I tend to use a lot of liquid fertilizer on my containers. It's a lot easier to water it in. I feel like when you water in a fertilizer, it actually spreads out and goes throughout the entire soil, compared to when you have a granular one. It's a little bit more centralized, which it can break down over time, but I feel like a pot, like a container pot, can actually do a lot better with a liquid fertilizer. Than like a soil fertilizer, which you can actually throw into your garden and spread around. It's a lot easier in that sense.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're coming probably somewhere close to an ending point, but I wanted to at least show off another plant that I was really excited to do this project. I have a really big Nepenthes, which is a carnivorous plant. It's a very different kind of plant than a lot of the other house plants that I have, because as a carnivorous plant, they get most of their nutrients from actually eating bugs and other kinds of stuff inside their pitchers, compared to using fertilizer on the soil. So we were just talking about fertilizer. This is a plant that actually doesn't really like a lot of fertilizer. It likes to kind of get its nutrients from the environment, which is maybe fungus gnats or is maybe flies or something like that. But I have these little cuttings of Nepenthes, little pitcher plants, that I took from my mother plant, which is over in the corner over there, and it's really big. And I just took a bunch of cuttings from its stem, put it into a container, kind of like this. I put the lid on it for a little while, create a really humidity zone. They like a lot of humidity and they like a lot of moisture. So I wanted to make sure that they were really having a lot of that kind of water moving around to really get those roots growing really quickly. And then once they started growing, I took off the lid and let them grow into my natural kind of environment, the natural humidity of my room, which is kind of high because I have a lot of plants in here. But in general, I have these. There's a bunch of stems. Oh, and let me show you. On this one right here, just to pull back the curtain, I put a bunch of stems inside here, and 2 of them didn't take. So how we were talking about earlier, where sometimes a rooting of a plant doesn't really work out too well, it totally, it's a numbers game. And sometimes you'll have one that really takes off, and then 1 or 2 that really just die away and they don't actually survive. So don't ever be disheartened that your plant didn't fully root, or not all your plants rooted. It's not something that's ever going to completely be successful, but you kind of have to keep on trying and give it a couple of attempts and have a bunch of different little plants. So we actually have a bunch of Nepenthes at our Slope Garden store. I think a few of our stores definitely sells them, but I know we have a bunch at our one on Slope Boulevard. So I wanted to bring one over because I can promote that and maybe get more people to have these carnivorous plants, because I love them so much. I have this cool pot that we also just got into, which is a stone art pot. It is one of those self-watering kinds of pots. It's not something I usually use very often. I tend to use more of a saucer pot, but I thought it would be perfect for a plant that loves to be watered, loves to keep water inside of its soil all the time. Carnivorous plants like to be a little bit more boggy, so they like to have water kind of always around the root system compared to other plants that just do not want water always sitting in their saucer. The nice thing also is these have a little plug on the bottom, so I'm able to take it out and release some of the water and kind of get out those salts and other nutrients that maybe are kind of festering at the bottom, and then do another full douse. So I thought this pot was really cool, and I thought it'd be great for this Nepenthes project I have, and I wanted to share that with you guys.
Don't the African violets too kind of like more moist, so like a pot?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you think that would be good for African violet? Yeah.
I think so too. An African violet is something that will like to be bottom watered. It likes to
Right.
have a pretty moist soil, very like fluffy and nutrient filled, but also like not very dry, right? So I think that would also work. There's a lot of plants that this would work with, but today Nepenthes is my plant of choice. I also have here a little box which has my soil mixture. And so this is not stuff I really listed on my supplies list because it's a little bit more specific, but I wanted to really show you that there are many different kinds of soils and there's many different kinds of planting mediums. And this one is based around mosses. So this is a sphagnum moss. It's also called like an orchid moss. A lot of people use it for orchids or staghorn ferns and stuff like that. I have a peat moss, which is a little bit more of a dustier kind of brown moss. You can also absolutely use cocoa fiber, and I usually recommend that, or the cocoa core, I guess, which is from the coconut plant, and that stuff is really great. And then some of the horticultural sand. So horticultural sand, some sort of brown moss or cocoa fiber, and that's like our peat moss, and then your sphagnum moss. And then I threw a little bit of charcoal in here as well, just because I have some charcoal and I kind of like the effect that charcoal does. It neutralizes some of the smells. And on a plant that I'm going to have a lot of soil or a lot of water kind of sitting there for a little while, it helps out with that smell. Do you use charcoal in some of your stuff, Jen?
I use it. In fact, somebody asked about a glass container for like to be able to see the roots of the plant, and a plug for my terrarium class coming up. I'll find the date, but yeah, I use charcoal in containers with no drainage. So because the thing is it helps neutralize any standing water. And so that's why I primarily use it. Yeah.
All right. I mixed it all around. This is a little bit heavy on the sphagnum moss, but I kind of like that for my carnivorous plants. I have some of my other ones in more sphagnum. You can absolutely just do a mixture of horticultural sand and a peat moss. That's like the traditional growing medium, but I do what I want, you know.
So that the Nepenthes, they were already rooted, or did you have to root them? Like, are you just?
I had a large stem. Here, let me grab one.
I would love to do a whole carnivorous. We'll do a carnivorous plant webinar. We'll dive deeper into carnivorous plants because that's a whole thing for sure.
I just walked away and went to my large Nepenthes plant, and it's a pretty big one right now, and I pulled off a stem of it, just trimmed it right now. What I did with this is I came in and I trimmed each section. I think I maybe did, I trimmed off one leaf. Sorry if it's loud with the scissor. I trimmed off one leaf and I left the leaf on. And so I put this into the soil mixture or my rooting mixture. I think it was a very sphagnum moss based soil as well. And this is where all the roots came out, and then a new stem popped out the top. So when I do cuttings of some of these plants, I'll either do a 2-node cutting, which is just the node on the bottom is where the roots are coming out, and the node on top is where the new stem is going to come out. You can definitely do a 1-node cutting, and roots will come out and stem will come out the same side. But I feel like it's a little bit less likely it's going to root nicely. I feel like the 2 is a little bit better for some plants. And then like the goldfish plant we had earlier, I had a bunch of nodes with a bunch of leaves because I kind of wanted a little bit more of a full look. I didn't want just one little leaf. That's how I did these rootings. I just cut a bunch of these, stuck them into some basic nursery containers with my kind of mossy soil, and then put them inside a rooting box for months. I don't know if you remember how long that was. Many months. But let's pull it out and actually see what the roots look like.
Yeah, and you keep them pretty moist there. Yeah.
Keep them pretty moist. So I just watered these not that long ago, but I tend to use a lot of water for these and let them sit in water. Because like I said, they are like a boggy type plant. They actually like a little more water. It's a little bit different than all the other plants I have around me. And so one reason that I don't want to like give you the wrong knowledge for all the other plants, but this is a different kind of plant and just showing you that there are variety out there. And so you kind of have to know what's going on. It is nice and it's holding together. I definitely have roots inside there. You can kind of see a few of them coming out the side here, well, kind of. But it's a good little mixture. I'm going to separate out. No, actually, no, they're all alive. All right. In my pot, I'm going to be popping it in here. Once I get some more soil, I'm going to put my soil.
Let's see.
Oh, there it is. Sorry. Okay. We're coming near the end, so I'm going to just put this together and be almost done. So if there's any more questions out there that people have been kind of asking about or wanting to know, kind of start throwing them out there.
Yeah, I was just gonna say let's do some closing questions. You mentioned elephant plant. Was it the elephant ear plant? People were wondering the botanical. I didn't
The alocasia.
hear alocasia. Okay, so
the alocasia is one of those plants that a lot of people really love right now. I really like alocasias a lot. There's a lot of varieties of those. So elephant ear is the common name that most people know it by. And these are plants that actually like a pretty bright spot and some good moisture, but they also want they don't want too much moisture. They're right in the middle in that kind of range. And I've been testing out with different varieties of the elephant ear. And I have some large leaf ones. I have some small leaf ones. There's like all the jewel varieties. So it's a plant variety that I really like. I would love to talk about one day a little bit more in detail. So maybe that could be another talk that we can have.
yeah, and some people, I should have thought to put this in the email, but people are asking about different plants for different light requirements, and we do have a handout on that. So I put the link in the chat for the handout for some ideas for plants for different light requirements. And also most stores have the plants displayed in little islands of their light requirements. So the staff should be able to help you if you have lower light or higher light. And then, do you ever use a moisture meter?
For moisture meters, I honestly don't. I definitely sell them and I talk to people about them, and I've had a lot of guests and friends actually say how helpful they are. I tend to put my fingers in the soil more, or I do a lot of lifting. So whenever I go by my plants, I kind of lift them up and I have a general idea of how much they should weigh when they're wet and when they're dry. So if I pick up a plant and like the top of the plant's really heavy because of all the foliage, but the bottom's super light, that usually means it needs water. And that's my kind of testing method for watering. Also looking, of course, at the top of the soil, seeing how dry it is, sticking in your finger, seeing how dry it is a little bit, a few inches down. And then if you have a larger plant, or you have a plant that you're worried that the bottom, like the very bottom of the soil is still wet, if the top looks dry, that I think is when the moisture meter really comes in handy. So if you have a large plant that you need to like test that bottom layer, that you're like, I'm worried that maybe there's not enough drainage at the bottom. Maybe the hole's not large enough, or maybe it plugged up, or maybe this plant's holding a lot of water at the bottom, but it's dry on top. And if I water it right now, I'm worried that I'm going to overwater it. I think that's where the moisture meter really comes into play.
Yeah, that makes sense. I typically don't use them myself either. But okay, let's see. Oh, this is a good question. You might have mentioned this for a second, but humidity trays, can you show what does that look like? Because a lot of indoor plants benefit from humidity trays. I know.
Humidity tray. I'll give you a quick look at one.
I mean, you have to keep in mind a lot of this stuff, their native environment is like the rainforest, right? So just sort of being able to mimic that environment as much as possible is beneficial to the plant.
Yeah, I was kind of talking about how when you have a lot of plants in one room, you create a lot of humidity around them because they're all transpiring, they're pulling water out of the soil and then putting it out their leaves, and that kind of creates this humidity in your room. So the room I'm in right now, it's not overly humid, but it is definitely higher on the humidity, and I kind of want that for my plants. There's a lot of sun that comes in, so everything kind of heats up and gets a little bit like warmer and steamier. It's also the room I have my computer in, so it's not really great for that, but this is a plant, you want to see kind of a little bit overgrown Playa Pepperonis. It's one of those really, really fancy plants. It was really popular for a good while. It was very expensive, and then it kind of went a little bit down in that popularity, but they're still really cute and they're really easy to grow. I've had one sitting in a humidity tray for a long time. It is a saucer that has rocks inside of it, and so when you water it, the excess water fills in those rocks, so the plant is not sitting in the water, but the water down there actually has more surface area to evaporate, and when it evaporates off of that surface area, it kind of creates a little humidity bubble around the plant, and that's kind of what the general idea of a humidity tray is. There's different kinds. There's also ones where you have a large tray with lots of plants on it, and that's a really big humidity tray for lots of moisture, or you have like the single ones, which are just like these little ones like that. And quick like little update, you know, sometimes the plants have damage here and there. They might not look perfect, but you know, you love them for what they are. This is one of my ones I've had for a little while in a tiny little pot.
I love that plant.
All right. One thing I was hoping to talk more about today, but we're kind of slowly running out of time, is bugs and diseases and pests and all those issues.
Troubleshooting, yeah.
Like that is what most people tend to have questions about. I know it's really fun to talk about your plants, but the bugs and the problems that you run into are really what you need to learn about when you're growing out plants and becoming more of a plant parent. So I wish I could talk a little more about that, and I'm going to kind of get into it right now, but I know we'll probably run out of time as I talk. One thing that I've dealt with a lot in my house is aphids and fungus gnats. Those are my main two problems, and mealybug. Actually, a few different things, but the bugs that are like the aphids, the mealybug, the thrips, the spider mites. These are all scary words for plant people. They're the ones that are going to damage your plants and actually cause issues. I don't know if I have any more on this, but I definitely had a bunch of leaves on this plant that were attacked early on. And what happens is the newest leaves coming out are the tenderest and the tastiest for all those different kinds of bugs. And so they will go after the newest growth. And then they will suck out the nutrients, and that will cause the leaf to kind of crinkle. It will develop a little bit malformed. You might get little spots on your leaves. And later on down the line, when the leaf is fully finished and maybe the bugs aren't there anymore, your leaf will look a little bit damaged. And a lot of times I actually have people bringing in leaves and asking what's wrong with the plant. And I will say to them, it's actually an early bug damage that you can't really avoid right now because it's already gone. But that's actually what's happening to a leaf. So I don't have too many on here to show off for that. I might find a plant that has it, but if you have a plant that you see some of the leaves are just a little bit different than the other ones, maybe they have weird spots or kind of a crinkle to it, that's probably what's happening. And a lot of times that's a good key in to look at the rest of the plant. It's always good as a plant parent to go around and as you're watering or as you're taking care of your plants, to actually inspect them. Look underneath your leaves, look at the veins underneath the leaf is really important because that is where most of the bugs will actually sit and hang out, because that's where they can kind of pull out a lot of nutrients. And then all your new growth, so your new little leaf spikes, that's where all the bugs are going to end up being. So that's where I should suggest checking out, looking at your plants, and then dealing with them with how you feel like you should deal with them. I have a bunch of different kinds of stuff I deal with them. So if you have a plant that's pretty small, you can absolutely just wipe off all the bugs. I use a little a paper towel or a little Q-tip with some horticultural oil, or some people use like the isopropyl alcohol or something like that. So this is all seasons horticultural oil. I use this a lot on my scale and mealybug. I don't know if many of you probably know what scale and mealybug are. It's a very annoying pest that you have. You know, I was actually a little bit prepared today. Sorry if that was loud. Here's another plant. Sorry, everyone is trying to learn all the plant names. This is a dendrobium. It's an orchid, dendrobium orchid. And I've had scale on this plant for a while now, and I've tried to get rid of it a few times, and it goes away and it comes back, and I'm probably not gonna be able to show it off, but you can see this leaf is a little bit damaged and it has some white speckles on it. It's really hard to show. You can see a little bit of damage there. Those white speckles are actually little scale-like bugs, and I've come in with some of that all seasons oil with a little Q-tip and kind of wipe them off to clean them off. So going in and actually cleaning off your plants is really important for, I'll hold this up for a little longer. Going in and actually wiping off and cleaning off your leaves is really important for dealing with like scales or mealybugs or spider mites, which are something I can't actually show in here because they are so very small, but they cause a lot of damage for plants and they can spread really fast. So that's why it's always good to check on the back of your leaves, see what's going on. If you're not sure what's actually happening, definitely bring it into our stores, like Jen said, we'll baggie, and we can help identify them and maybe give you some good options for physical, just kind of dealing with the problem with like water or with wiping it, or we have some good sprays for that, neem oil or insecticidal soap. All those kinds of stuff are pretty useful in this sense.
Yeah, and keep the best, I think the best advice really is to just, as soon as you notice it, try to do something about it, whether it's, you know, wiping it off, even just sometimes soapy water or something like that. But it can, you know, the bugs can spread pretty quick once they get going, right? So it's kind of good to just stay on top of it if you can.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And especially when the more plants you own, it can really be a problem that is very easy to kind of put off for a while, but the longer you put it off, the more likely they can spread around. And so not all bugs will immediately spread to all your plants. They actually tend to specialize a little bit more. I've had a plant covered in spider mites next to a couple of other plants, and none of the other plants had any spider mites on them at all. So that they're very much specializing on this specific plant. There's probably some sort of taste or hormone or whatever they're doing to get it from this plant. They are specializing on that one. But I've also had it where I had a plant with aphids on it, and then I looked underneath it, and all the other plants also has aphids because they're a little bit more generalized, and so they'll kind of spread around. So if you don't take care of them right away, you end up having with a larger project on your hand, and it takes like a full day to really pull everything out and then spray them off, because you can use water to get rid of aphids in a lot of senses, just to kind of spray them off. And then if you want to use like a neem oil or some sort of like organic spray to kind of help protect the plant from the future, it's also a good idea.
I think we should plan a class, just troubleshooting house plant care. So we'll do that, because definitely, you know, that's worth taking, like I said, a deeper dive into. But I really appreciate everything that you presented today. It was really fun and a good sort of coverage of a variety of different things. So I really appreciate your time and expertise. Everybody, if we didn't address your questions in yeah, I'm already getting notes. Yes, do the troubleshooting class. Okay, we're gonna do it. Don't worry. We're check. We'll do it. So, but if we didn't address your questions, you know, we do want, of course, we want to support you on your plant journey. So feel free to email me. And like Taylor said, you know, he's available in the stores as well as a lot of our other, you know, at every store, there's knowledgeable staff that's willing and able readily to help you with any plant questions that you might have. Like he mentioned, you know, if you are concerned about a leaf or, you know, something, bring it in a plastic bag and we can help you address whatever's happening with your plant. It's kind of, I don't know if it's raining where you all are. I think it's looming. I'm so happy about the rain. I know. I'm so happy
I wanted
about
to definitely thank everyone for sticking with me and kind of let me ramble on about all the plants I love.
No, we love your enthusiasm.
Stuff, and I really wanted to kind of give the idea that when you're a plant parent, it's really it's care, and it's also it is a lot of work. Being any kind of parent is a lot of work. So it really takes time to work on each project, really look at your plants, really water them, learn about them. I'm really all about learning as many things as you can, and I would love to share it with you. So yeah, I'm in the store. We have the Instagram going. So our Slow Gardens has an Instagram.
Oh yeah.
On my Instagram, I'm Tailored Plants. If you want to look at some of my stuff or look at the rest of my room, talk to me about that on Instagram or Plant Life or anything like that. So Tailored Plants, and then Slow Gardens is doing stuff. We also have this recording on our YouTube page as well as our website, which is where you found it. So if you want to go over it again or actually look at those plants and me shaking them all around, you actually look at it for a second. It'll all be right there. So yeah, it was really fun. I enjoyed a lot of it. So I hope to do some more classes, and definitely any ideas for what you want to learn about, let us know. The troubleshooting one's a great idea.
Yeah, absolutely. The Instagram, what's your Instagram again?
Tailored Plants, TAYLORED PLANTS.
Yeah, and then Sloat is just Sloat Gardens, the Instagram too. And we do post videos. Taylor's done some sort of short clips of houseplant care videos, both for Sloat and on his own Instagram page. So a lot of people saying, thank you, Taylor. They really enjoyed your class. So excellent job. Yeah, everyone have a great rest of your Saturday.
Yeah.
And we hope to
rainwater.
Yeah, go collect some rainwater. That's a great idea. Yeah, they would love it. The indoor plants would love that rainwater. And we hope to see you at the indoor plant design class on Wednesday. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Taylor.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care. Have a great day.